to you for being here on this evening, for spending your time investing in yourself, investing in what it means to practice soul care, infused with self care, and what that looks like for the abolitionist teacher, educator, or just anyone who works in community with others. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dr. Melanie Desmuke-Battles, and I am the owner and founding consultant of Scholars for the Soul, an educational consulting firm licensed here in the state of Arkansas. And here are just a few of my credentials, just to tell you a little bit more about me. If you have never met me before, if you're just joining the Soul Scholar Tribe, thank you for joining in with me. And I am hoping that you gain some information from this um, time that we have together, and you gain information that we can use with one another. So I've left my contact information down below. I love to engage personally. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not any of those things. I am just a regular person here trying to do this equity work in the specific field of education and culturally responsive teaching. So my website is there, as I'm sure you may already know, and that is my other information for you to find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse. So let's get into it. So we're going to start off this session looking at Angela Davis and what she says about radical self-care.
Anyone who's interested in making change in the world also has to learn how to take care of herself, himself, their selves. For a long time, activists did not necessarily think that it mattered to take care of themselves in terms of what they eat, in terms of mental self-care, corporal self-care, spiritual self-care. I know that there were some people who emphasized it. I'm thinking about one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party, Erica Huggins, who began to practice yoga and meditation in the 70s, and she encouraged many people, including Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, to join that practice. I think they did a little bit of it, but I think our movement would have been very different had we understood the importance of that kind of self-care. Personally, I started practicing yoga and meditation when I was in jail, but it was more of an individual practice. Later, I had to recognize the importance of emphasizing the collective character of that work on the self. Well, it means that we're able to bring our entire selves into the movement. It means that we incorporate into our work as activists ways of acknowledging and hopefully also moving beyond trauma. It means a holistic approach, I think. I think longevity is important, and not simply individual longevity. It is equally important to recognize that as we develop our movement today, we're creating a terrain for the emergence of new activists. And what we do today has an impact on what younger people will be able to do tomorrow. I think we have to imagine ourselves as connected to people who came before us and to those who will come after us. Black people all over the world have been subjected to the most unimaginable forms of violence, slavery, torture. But at the same time, and this is what Black people have offered the world, we've also produced beauty, music, and art. And I think that the self-care that gets produced by Black people recognizes the connection between struggle and art and beauty and the imagination. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous not to recognize that as we struggle, we're attempting to presage the world to come. And the world to come should be one in which we acknowledge the collectivity and connections and relations and joy. And if we don't start practicing collective self-care now, there's no way to imagine, much less reach a time of freedom.
All right, so we're going to
Wonder. This is our home.
All right, let me get back to my screen. Thank you to those who are coming into the room. We were just looking at the great Angela Davis, who talked about radical self-care and what that looked like, and as it being a practice that many have taken on over the years. Let me make the screen bigger. There we go. So when I think about self-care, I always reflect on how important, how vital it is to first infuse or start with that soul care. So to distinguish between the two, we're looking at soul care as connecting to your spiritual foundation while allowing the love to flow within. So as you think about your spiritual foundation, whatever that is for you, for me, my spiritual foundation is in God and in Christ. But what do you connect to? A higher power that you connect to that's greater than you. And in order to do that, we have to be in a space of humility, a space where we are open to receive love. And love is a beautiful, beautiful, transformative concept that has such great power to move us and shift us and shape us into the beings we need to be. Because the work that we do as equity warriors, as culturally responsive educators, as people of color, or those who serve Black, Indigenous, people of color, we have to have a space of humility so that we can allow the love in to do the things that I've just mentioned before. And that involves us surrendering. That involves us looking at ourselves as ones that deserve to be loved. But we surrender all of our own personal agendas, all of our own selfish ambitions during soul care. It's not about the work that you do necessarily. It's not about the people that you serve when you're caring for your soul. You're looking at how can I surrender my inner workings to a power that's bigger than me, because that love will come in and it will nurture you. That love will come in and it will even correct you. And through that correction, it will guide you so that when you are enacting this work out into the earth and out into the atmosphere, you are able, excuse me, to be at your absolute best. And when you need to refill, you have to come back to this soul care. One thing I want to emphasize is the juxtaposition of balance and grace. So we have to balance out the things that we do. Sometimes we say yes so often that we don't say yes enough to soul care. We say yes to the things that we have to do. We're mothers, we're fathers, we're sisters, we're teachers, we're community activists. We're all these wonderful and amazing things. But sometimes, and oftentimes I find, even this is for myself, because this is how I was able to really balance into this. I neglected that. There was a time in my life where I was doing so much of the work. I was in my doctoral studies. And if you, not even if you've been in doc studies, but just any kind of higher education or training or credentialing that you've been through, it can be taxing to your body. And it can be taxing to your mind because you will have this abundance of knowledge and this overwhelming of information that you have to balance that. And you have to give yourself grace. Grace means I know that I am not going to do everything in the world's perfect eyes. And I grant myself grace, even when I have intentions for soul care and maybe I don't engage in that wholeheartedly. I provide myself with grace. So I'm going to give you guys, as we go through this, some actionable steps to take the small steps. You know, we want to indulge in this. And for some of us, we may be beginning on this journey. Some of us may not even engage in soul care, but maybe we engage in self care. So let's look at what self care is. The portion of self care is that physical engagement in things that help us to relax and alleviate stress. So that could be going to the salon, that could be getting your manis or petties, reading a book for entertainment, playing, coloring. I bought a coloring book, and while I engage in that, if I don't infuse the soul care within that moment, and I'm just doing the work of coloring, I'm not thinking about how am I really serving myself, but I'm idle-minded in that work, we leave out the value of soul care within that. So it's important for us to make sure that our self-care has soul care as the basis. So next we look at self-care and radical self-care. And this was an amazing TED Talk. I'm only going to show a brief portion of it, but she looks at self-care through the radical lens and how that's infused with community care. So we're going to listen in to her here for just a few moments.
When I dreamed of being.
All right.
So in my practice, I had the pleasure of meeting Sasha. It's not a real name, but it is an ode to Beyonce. So I met Sasha, and I always got to have Beyonce with me. And she was this vibrant 15-year-old young lady. And I could see that. She was smart, she was spunky, she was engaged. But as we've heard today, she was struggling as a student. She was challenged. She could not complete her assignments. And as I was talking to her more, I learned that she couldn't sleep at night. You know, she felt really down, right? You start to really uncover some things. And as I was speaking to her, we spoke a lot about self-care, right? Which is very popular and very cool and very current. And so we talked a lot about how self-care was radical, right? And that was something that I love to discuss, caring for ourselves, which is very, very important. But as I was speaking to Sasha, it became pretty apparent to me that the singular experience that she was having was actually completely connected to her community. So as I spoke to her more, we arrived here. Community care is radical. And community care was radical, in particular for Sasha, because there was not any hospitals in the area. There was not a job in which her mother could be adequately compensated in her neighborhood. There was not a local program or after-school program or resource center for the young people. So truly, it was impossible for Sasha to ever reach the limit or to peak in self-care because her community had not received the care it needed. So community care is radical for two reasons. The first reason is, especially as Americans or people who live within the U.S., we are taught to be individualistic in our pursuits. Community care takes into consideration the person as a part of the whole. The second reason community care in particular is radical is because it allows vulnerable populations to receive the resources and care that they deserve and need. So community care looks like these three things for me. In my practice, this is what I learned: awareness, affirmation, and access. So awareness. What is happening in my life? How am I connected to my community? How am I impacted by the macro, meso, and micro decisions that are made about my life? How are we all politically connected, socially connected, emotionally connected? So being able to have an awareness about where we situate ourselves, okay? The second thing was affirmation. So affirming that we are all having this experience that may leave us broken, that may leave us also in positive situations, but being able to have a conversation, especially with my young people, affirming and telling them that their experience matters and it's important. And then access. So I spoke a little bit about this, but resources. What is available to our youth? What kind of education are they receiving? What sort of hospital and medical benefits are they able to acquire? These are all really important things to consider when we think not just of self-care, but how we can be more radical in community care. The great poet, scholar, activist, Audre Lorde said, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare."
You're muted.
Thank you, sister. uh, but yes, I studied some of her work as a black as a black feminist, queer author and woman and mother. She held so many different identities that intersected at all times. She could not peel away one and be only one identity. They always intersected and always informed her life and her experiences, particularly with other people. And the idea of self-preservation is absolutely important because our preservation, specifically as Black people, specifically as Black women, is so very important because we have so many things that are against us that do not want to see us thrive. And so we have to be radical. So to be radical about your self-care is such an idea that we have to take hold of. And it requires a high level of commitment from us so that we engage in this radical self-care. And we're always contemplating how can my radical self-care come into communities with others and encourage others to really engage in community care and community self-care, or just community care overall. So these three things that this amazing woman just brought out were awareness, affirmation, and access. And these things can be brought into our soul care, and then they can be communicated to the other groups that you are in community with. Because the beautiful things that we receive that help us to thrive, because we don't want to, like the amazing Bettina Love says, we don't want to just survive. We want to do more than survive. We want to thrive. As Black people, being a person who can thrive is a political revolutionary force, because we know, and you can see it in the news. I mean, we are so sick, and I know I'm not the only one, but so sick of seeing our Black children, our Black men, our Black women, the trans community, the queer community. No matter what you believe about how they live, everybody as a human being has a right to thrive in this earth and in this space together. So first, bringing that idea of awareness and really being aware of where you are in your journey. You may be just starting. And if that is the case, this is an amazing place to start. And that's what I talked about when I presented the first slide, distinguishing soul care, and I spoke about balance and grace. This is not a time for us to beat ourselves up because we have not been practicing these care mechanisms and these routines. This is a time to always stay in a space of awareness and always even be aware of what's going on, the energy that is around us, the things that are going on around us that can inform how deep our soul care needs to go. And then when you think about affirmation, for me, I think about the power of language. And I talked about that in my podcast. And if y'all have not listened to any podcast episodes, I'm available everywhere except Google. So please So thank you. So please feel welcome to go and subscribe and listen. But the latest one that I uploaded was about the what is it? Judas and the Black Messiah, that movie. And it really, really brought to the forefront the power of affirming language. And I talked about how the great brother Fred Hampton used affirmative language with the children that he fed every morning before they went to school. Teachers in that community remarked upon how much more their students were engaged because they simply were no longer hungry. So you had these programs where they weren't doing this on a government scale, on a bigger scale like they are now. We have a lot of free food programs occurring now within our schools, but this was something new that was happening. And so you have these situations where this brother was doing this affirming work and saying the words like, I am a revolutionary. And the people would repeat him, I am a revolutionary. And every time he said it, they just grew in power. They grew in volume because not only was he affirming himself, his words were affirming the community that was there listening to him. So the power of language in our affirmations and even in noticing and naming what's going on around us, being in community with others is another part of our radical self-care. We gotta prevent ourselves from staying in isolation. Isolation, I do enjoy being alone. I enjoy allowing my thoughts time to process, but I know that I can't stay in that space because that keeps me stagnant from allowing the tendrils of my affirmative words to myself and to my soul. I prevent those tendrils, which are those roots that leave out from plants. I prevent them from reaching out through the soil of this earth to other people. So I have to get out in the space and affirm others. And even sometimes we may have to teach others the power of language in affirmation because it is so powerful. And unless you've been exposed to this kind of work, you don't know what you don't know. And then thirdly, she talks about access. And so even sometimes there are situations and traumas that we've endured that are so deep that we have to get access to other opportunities to express what has occurred to us, the traumas that we have dealt with. And that access could be to mental health therapists. It could be to other women who are in support or other people who are in support groups with you. But having and gaining access to the resources that we need to thrive is very, very, very important. So I've created this. Well, I didn't create this visual, but I brought this in because I want you guys to think, and I did create a Google slide for you guys so that you can write this down. You can print this off. You can write into it yourself. You can post it up and think about and reflect and honor your sphere of control and influence. So if you see in that middle circle, those are the things you can control. Those are the things you have power over. And typically those are the things that are seated within your soul and within your own being. So take control over the intensity by which you engage in soul care, the frequency by which you engage in self-care and community care. And then think in the next circle about what you can influence. Because we have influence here in this world. You know, there are so many things. We have Clubhouse, we have social media, we have community groups and friendships and family relationships that we're all probably engaged in one way or the other. And that can be our sphere of influence where we can continue in this abolitionist framework where we are fighting for the equity, fighting for the rights to just live as a valuable human being. And then the last sphere is recognizing that some things are absolutely out of your control. My cousin came in today and she's on the Clubhouse with us, but she talked about how as an artist, she went into this organization and initially she said yes, it seemed like a very good opportunity, but as she got inside of the organization, it didn't align with her values. It didn't align with her spiritual goals and the work that she wanted to present to the world. She found out that it didn't align. Could she dismantle the entire organization? Probably not at that moment, but she knew what she could control. So to withdraw yourself from spaces that don't serve the enrichment of your soul, because even in some spaces that are uncomfortable, they can still be lessons for us to learn. So even in that, I'm sure she was able to learn some things about what I do say yes to, what I do engage in, what I do honor myself with, and what I don't. So we just have to keep those things in mind. So I looked up some research, and this is very recent research in 2020. And there was a young lady, I know her last name is Smith, and the citation is 2020. I'll also share with you guys in an email to those in the tribe. I will share this article with you, but she looked at self-care and soul care, and she actually named it soul care. So it was really great to see other people affirming the value in soul care. And so with her work, she talked about, first of all, the intensity of stress on the human body and how our minds can be overloaded. And I know some of you may understand how that feels to have so many obligations, in addition to having families, in addition to having full-time or part-time jobs, and wanting to be with friends and wanting to be active in your community and give back. All of those things can tax your physical body. And so for us, even as those of you who are women on the call, we know that heart disease is really, really a big thing, especially among Black women. And I always think about, why is that so big with Black women? And oftentimes we take on burdens. Zora Neale Hurston called us mules, because we take on the burdens of the world. We're nurturers at heart. We were created to be loving and to care and to give. And sometimes that can be to a fault if we don't scale back that intensity and push it more into caring for our own souls. Because like my mother always says, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So you have to fill yourself up daily. And so I say these things to encourage us on thinking about, how am I going to be a radical soul carer and self-care for myself and for others? Radical meaning I'm going to actually set aside the time. And as I am talking to y'all, I am preaching to myself, okay? Because we can get busy with doing so many things and we put ourselves to the side. I mean, we do. Y'all put something in the chat if you agree. If you put yourself to the side sometimes to give to others and you're coming from a great space, let me know that in the chat. But we're starting here with the acronym PRICE, P-R-I-C-E. And so she starts here first with the P, personalize. And I thought, man, these are great actionable steps. So I wanted to share them with you guys. Personalize your self-care, your soul care, by selecting strategies and routines that will benefit you. I tried yoga, wasn't my super big thing to do, but guess what? I love stretching. I love breathing in breathing deeply in and breathing out. I enjoy that. So what did I do? I selected that as something I do to wake my body up every morning, to regenerate the oxygen flow and the circulation throughout my body, drinking a glass of water to get myself started. So you guys can generate a list of just 5 self-care strategies, and they don't have to be big things. Like I said, it could be drinking water when you first wake up. That wakes up the organs. It could be having a cup of tea or having a cup of coffee and sitting still before you get busy for the day. Or at the end of the day, to wind yourself down. So to begin, if you can't, just easily come up with 5, start with 1 and give yourself a short time frame to instill these every day. Devote 10 minutes. Say, these are my 10 minutes of soul and self-care, and I'm going to be radical about it because I'm going to commit to it every single day. Next, this is what I mean, radicalize. Make it a top priority. Schedule it into your day just like you would schedule that Zoom meeting. Schedule it into your day just like you would say, I know I have to pick my children up at this time, and you have to do that, right? Because we don't want the people called on us thinking we don't take care of our children. So you have to do that. Make this self-care and soul care the same. And that could include, she lists a few ideas: meditating, journaling, and I love to journal. And in my journal, I do meditate, roller skating, praying, walking around the track, breathing in and out the fresh air, Set an audible alarm, something 15 minutes before you begin so that you can prepare yourself to engage in this activity. Because when the day by day continues to go on, you will forget until it becomes routine. So set an alarm and schedule that. The I is for intentionalize. And she says to intentionalize your soul and self-care plan by reflecting upon it and protecting it. That's what makes it so radical. You are protecting it with your entire soul because you see it is just that important. So review your daily agenda, put it in your calendar, reflect upon the benefits so that you can continue to see and make tangible this soul and self-care. Let your family know, especially for those of us who may have older children. And I don't mean teenagers, but they could be old enough to settle themselves and play alone for a few minutes without your eyes having to be right on them. But even if you have very small children, like my sister just had a newborn, schedule that time in or set an alarm periodically throughout the day when the baby's taking a nap or when you know that you have help with the child and somebody is there, you can set that designated sacred time. And remember, you should not be disturbed unless there is a true emergency. And the more intentional you are about that and protecting that, others in your space, whether your family or your friends or your children, they will begin to respect that sacred time. But it will take time if it's a new practice for you. Then the C stands for capitalize. Capitalize your plan by selecting strategies that feed your mind, body, spirit, and soul. So you have to find that strategy that feeds all of those components. So she gives the example of 30 minutes of salsa dancing, which allows her to relax, move her body, connect with others, and bring joy. So look at all those things. It touches her body. It allows her mind to relax. Her spirit is joyful and her soul is connecting with other people in that space. So think on your strategies. When you pick those things, see, are they feeding my mind, my body, my spirit, and my soul? And then lastly, E is energize. Energize your plan by infusing that radical self-care in your routine and make it a way of life that celebrates you and the lives of other Black women, or if we have men in here, other Black men or other people, even if you are not a Black person or a person of color, something that celebrates you and the lives of others. Seek out somebody who can help you. And she mentions Black women here because that was the focus of her research study. But think about your community. Find you somebody that it can be accountable. Maybe you guys are starting this journey together and focus and set your intentions that we are going to support one another. We are going to create and maintain these healthy self and soul care pathways. So next, here are some methods of soul care. These are some things that came to mind as I was preparing for tonight with you all and offering this free webinar as I want to do every month. And this actually, for this month specifically, is a form of my own soul care because I can engage with others. This allows me a space where, yes, I had to prepare. Yes, I had to spend time to get these things ready for you all. But during the engagement period of this time with you all, it allows me to feed my own mind. I can engage in things before I start that feed my body. I can work with you all to bring you all into community with me and really reflect on the joy that comes out of sharing with you all in this space. So looking at these things, I'll just go through them quickly because I know you all can see them, but I want to speak them out loud for Clubhouse as well. So slow down and pay attention. I wanted to start with that because this is me, again, moving fast, having so many things to do and being expected to do them all very well. And I've always had that expectation on my life, especially as, you know, an older sister and as a mother, you're expected to do certain things really well. And sometimes we do them well and people don't see that we have to stop and slow down. And we have to pay attention to your body. Your body is going to tell you when you're taking on too much. So be aware of that. Practice grace with yourself and practice a recovery strategy. Let's say you get off for a day or two, or maybe a week. How can you recover and get back into this soul care routine? What is the one thing you can do to say, okay, I said I was going to do this all week, but I didn't get to it Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So I'm going to recognize that. I'm going to give myself grace, and I'm going to come right back and practice those recovery strategies by at least trying one of those types of soul care strategies that you came up with that we discussed before. Recognize your triggers. Recognize the things that take you into a space that's not comfortable for your body. When your heart is beating fast, recognize when that's happening. When you're feeling hot, sometimes our body temperatures rise. When we're being triggered, sometimes we may even cry. And that's not all the time bad, but sometimes it could be a trigger that's external. And we want to recognize what that is so that we can self-excavate. We talked about that, my cousin and I just can't get away from that concept of self-excavating, really digging deep to the core of who you are, going back in time to the spaces where you were in childhood and thinking about those things that may have hurt you or those things that may have formed you in the way that you are. Because maybe you have walls up where you don't allow yourself to receive the love, even from your creator. Sometimes we can be so blocked that we don't even recognize that we're blocking the most beautiful love of all. So we have to be able to get down to the core so that we can heal and release those things that are keeping us consistently triggered in a negative way. Be more aware of the spiritual energy around you. You know, people try to make it seem like when you're aware of spiritual energy that, you know, you're a hippie or you're somebody that's just, I don't know, all the different terms that they use to describe that. But this has to be the foundation for the work that we're doing. Some of us as educators, some of us as artists, the different roles that we play. Be more aware of the spiritual energy, because sometimes that energy is transmitted in other human beings and they play that energy off, and it may, you know, come into your space and into your energy. And then you look up and you're irritated, or you're, this is a word one of my educator friends found out, befoodled. And she just used it ever since she's found out this new vocabulary word. But maybe you're befoodled, or you're just kind of confused about, why am I so annoyed? Be aware of the spiritual energy around you and be responsible for your own care and your own healing. You've got to be radical about it. We've got to be in a space where we're not just simply responding, but we're stopping and we're taking time to reflect and we're taking time to think. Yes, Jennifer. Yes. Don't block the blessings, because we can block our blessings sometimes by not being aware of the love that we have available at our expense. So invest in some reading that will not only be for leisure, which is fine. That's a great way to engage in some self-care. But invest in reading some soul uplifting and soul awareness literature. It could be your Bible. It could be your holy book. It could be a spiritual book that's helping you to recognize some of the things that could be going on inside of you. But invest in some reading that really uplifts and brings you to a higher space of awareness. And then release toxic thoughts, toxic behaviors, toxic, sometimes relationships. You have to recognize when things are not there to help serve your soul, not when they just irritate you, because we're human beings and sometimes we may be having a day and we may irritate people. That doesn't mean we necessarily need to be cut off, but sometimes there are relationships that are truly toxic. They continue to pour that toxic energy into you. And if you don't block it, it can consume you. So we have to engage in these types of soul care ideas and many more. And if you guys got any soul care ideas that you invest in, please feel free to share them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself at the end and we'll share out some of those things. So I watched another young lady who talked about soul care, and it brought to mind a lot of ways that we can infuse self-care with soul care. So start with a short routine. If this is something new for you, she calls it habit stacking. One small step at a time to establish consistency. And this is how you give yourself grace. You don't expect yourself, if you've never sat still and meditated, to be able to meditate for 20 minutes. It's not realistic for you, and it will make you more frustrated with yourself if you don't reach that unrealistic goal. So she says to start 30 seconds each. So one could be with body awareness, because we're bringing in our body into this space. So how can I stretch or do yoga or do Pilates or walk or even engage in some kind of exercise that really will pump you up and allow your body to be awakened? And then healthy eating. That's important, because we have to realize, yes, you can have, you can have a fried meal every so often, but our healthy eating is what's going to help sustain the physical part of us. Because we can engage in this soul care and self-care all day, but if we're feeding our body things that are toxic to our body, we can't expect our bodies to respond in healthy ways. So we've been given the tools. There's so many different recipes and okay. So many different recipes and so many different things out there. You don't have to go vegan, but if you want to try some plant-based meals, maybe once or twice a week, that's a great way to start. Drink a full glass of water to start your day. And drink more water throughout the day, because being dehydrated has a lot of negative effects on our body. So keeping water in your system. And if you want to start meditating, meditate for those 5 minutes and then build up on that. Start small. My sister sharing in the chat, meatless Mondays, which is a great way to start, because that meat, me and my daughter watched the Netflix documentary, What the Health, and I was absolutely disgusted. So I don't know if y'all have seen it or not, but I was like, oh no, I've got to cut all of that meat out. And I have since January 15th. And so I'm proud of myself that I've been able to abstain from taking in that processed meat, because honestly, guys, it is really, really bad for you. And the way that our society processes and distributes that meat is not for our good. And so we have to recognize those things that are contrary to what we're trying to do in being healthy and whole individuals. And then number 2, create a soul recovery space in your home. If you have the room, even if it's a small, a large closet or a small space in your bathroom where it can just be you engaging in this soul care, engaging in this self-care, so that you, okay, I'm gonna try that, so that you can have this space in your home where this is a sacred space, this is a protected space, and this is the space, this is my altar, or this is my soul room, or this is my soul closet. Those kind of spaces are super important, if you can have them, to have those spaces in your home.